Be me, Veronica. My life, up until a few months ago, was basically perfect. I had a brand, a voice, and an audience that hung on my every word. My apartment was all white walls and minimalist furniture, the kind you see in magazines. My mornings started with a celery juice, a yoga session, and then planning content for my channel. The V perspective. That was me. I talked about empowerment, social justice, and the structures that hold people back. Most of my content revolved around the concept of privilege, specifically the male kind. I made a video once, sitting on a plush velvet chair, with a perfectly crafted latte in my hand. The topic was the myth of men's struggles. I explained very calmly that what men often call hardship is just the baseline difficulty of adult life. The pressure to provide, that's just having a job. The loneliness, a failure to build emotional connections. I said that life for the average man was like playing a video game on the easiest setting and still complaining about the tutorial level. The video did numbers, huge numbers. My followers loved it. The comments were full of fire emojis and, "Yas queen, speak your truth." But a different crowd found it too. The backlash was intense. Thousands of comments from men. They were angry. They talked about their fathers, their grandfathers. They mentioned working jobs that broke their bodies, coming home too tired to speak, doing it all over again the next day. They said I didn't know anything about a man's life. They called me a pampered princess living in an ivory tower. I laughed it off at first. Just a bunch of angry guys who couldn't handle the truth. My boyfriend Ezra read some of the comments over my shoulder. He told me not to worry about them, that they were just exhibiting their toxic fragility. He called my video brave and necessary. But the comments kept coming, and one theme kept repeating, "You wouldn't last one day in our shoes." An idea sparked in my head. Not an idea born of empathy, but one born of arrogance and a craving for content. What if I did? What if I took their little challenge and threw it back in their faces? I could document the whole thing, a social experiment. I'd take a man's job for a month and prove, once and for all, that they were exaggerating. The content would be pure gold, the ultimate dunk. I announced it in a live stream that evening. I sat there in my perfectly lit studio and laid out the plan. Project Walk a Mile, I called it. I would get a job in manual labor for 30 days, no special treatment. I would live the life they claimed was so brutal. Ezra stood behind the camera, giving me a thumbs up. He thought it was the most brilliant idea I'd ever had. My comment section was a war zone, but my core audience was hyped. They were ready to see me dismantle the myth. Finding the job was easier than I thought. A massive logistics warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city was hiring general laborers. The online application was simple. The interview was a 5-minute conversation with a tired-looking manager who didn't seem to care who I was, as long as I could lift 50 pounds. I lied and said I could. How hard could it be? The first day arrived. My alarm went off at a time I didn't even know existed. 4:30 a.m. It was pitch black outside. The world was silent. I put on the brand new work clothes I'd bought, stiff jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a pair of steel-toed boots that felt like cinder blocks on my feet. I even mounted a small GoPro to a chest harness, ready to capture everything. Ezra was still asleep. He'd told me the night before how proud he was, then rolled over and started snoring. The drive to the warehouse was surreal. Empty streets, then suddenly a flood of old cars and pickup trucks, all heading in the same direction. The warehouse itself was a monster, a gray windowless box humming under sickly yellow lights. Inside, it was a city of shelves, conveyor belts, and noise. The constant beeping of forklifts, the roar of machinery, the shouting of supervisors. The foreman, a man with a weathered face and a permanent scowl, gathered the new hires. He didn't give a welcome speech. He just pointed. You, and you, he said, his eyes scanning over us. His gaze rested on me for a fraction of a second, no change in expression. Zone C, unload the trucks. Raymond will show you. He didn't ask my name. I was just you. Raymond was a guy maybe a little older than me, tall, quiet, with hands that looked like they were carved from wood. He didn't introduce himself. The foreman had already done it. He just gave me a short nod and led the way to a massive loading bay where a semi-truck was parked. The back of the truck was a wall of brown boxes, floor to ceiling. "We stacked them on the pallets," Raymond said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak. His voice was flat. Then the forklift takes them. Don't mix the SKUs. He picked up a box with an ease that was deceptive. I watched him do it, then reach for one myself. The moment I grabbed it, I knew I had made a mistake. It wasn't just heavy, it was awkward. The weight was poorly distributed. The cardboard edges dug into my fingers. I managed to heave it off the truck bed and stumble over to the pallet. I almost dropped it, my first box. There were thousands more. Raymond was already on his fourth. He moved with a rhythm, a kind of mechanical grace, no wasted motion. I tried to copy him, but I was clumsy. I was slow. After 20 minutes, my arms were burning. My lower back was starting to ache. Sweat was dripping down my face, stinging my eyes. The GoPro on my chest felt heavy and stupid. The other guys on the crew worked around me. They didn't talk to me. They didn't look at me. It wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was complete indifference. I was just an obstacle, a slow-moving part of the machine. An hour in, it felt like a day had passed. My brand new boots were already rubbing my heels raw. My hands were red and sore. I tried to make conversation during a brief pause while we waited for a forklift. So, been doing this long? I asked Raymond. He took a long drink from a beat-up water bottle. A while, he said, and that was it. The conversation was over. The first break came at 9 a.m. 15 minutes, I collapsed onto a wooden bench. I felt like I'd been run over. I watched the other guys. They didn't relax. They just stopped. They drank water, stared into space. Some scrolled on their phones with cracked screens. There was no chatter, no camaraderie like you see in movies, just a shared silent exhaustion. I felt a crushing sense of being an outsider. Back at my apartment, I was a personality, a voice. Here, I was just a pair of hands, and not very good ones at that. The rest of the day was a blur of pain, lifting, twisting, stacking. The same motion, over and over. The noise was relentless. The air was thick with dust. By the time the final horn blew, I could barely walk. My entire body was a single, throbbing ache. I drove home in a daze. I didn't even have the energy to listen to a podcast. I stumbled into my apartment. It was so clean, so quiet. It felt like a different planet. Ezra greeted me at the door with a huge smile. "You did it. How was it? Did you get some good footage of the toxic masculinity?" I just shook my head and shuffled past him to the couch, where I collapsed. I couldn't even form a sentence. He brought me a glass of water. "You look exhausted. That's so authentic. Your audience is going to eat this up." He started talking about engagement metrics and potential brand deals. I just lay there, my eyes closed, listening to the sound of his voice, as if it were coming from a million miles away. That night, I tried to edit the GoPro footage. I looked at myself on the screen. My face was shiny with sweat. My hair was a mess. My expression was one of pure misery. It wasn't the heroic, defiant content I had imagined. It was just pathetic. I managed to cut together a 1-minute clip, set it to some empowering music, and posted it with a caption about Day 1 of dismantling the patriarchy from the inside. The likes poured in, but it felt like a lie. Waking up on Day 2 was harder than Day 1. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest. I had blisters on my hands and my feet. I almost called in sick, but I thought of the comments, of the smug satisfaction they would feel. So I swallowed a handful of painkillers and dragged myself out of bed. The first week was the worst week of my life. Each day was the same endless cycle of physical torment. The work wasn't complicated, but it was brutally demanding. It was a war of attrition against your own body. The social environment never changed. I was invisible. The men weren't being toxic. They weren't making crude jokes or harassing me. They were just working. They were too tired, too focused on getting through the day to pay me any mind. I realized my whole framework for understanding men was based on how they acted in social situations, in offices, on dates. I had no idea how they acted when they were just trying to survive a 10-hour shift of manual labor. There was no posturing, no ego, just a grim shared understanding that this sucked, and the only way out was to keep moving until the horn blew. My home life became a strange disconnect. I'd come home smelling of sweat and dust, every part of me aching, and Ezra would want to talk about his day. He'd complain about a passive-aggressive email from his boss, or how the barista put oat milk in his coffee instead of almond. I'd just stare at him, too tired to even feel angry. His problems seemed so small, so trivial, from a world I no longer felt a part of. He'd ask about my day, but he didn't really want to know. He wanted anecdotes. He wanted stories about me owning the misogynists. He didn't want to hear that my biggest struggle was trying not to cry when I dropped a heavy box on my foot. My online persona was also becoming a burden. My followers wanted updates. They wanted me to be a hero. So I'd force a smile for a selfie in my work gear, filter out the dark circles under my eyes, and write a caption about being strong and unbreakable. My influencer friends would text me, "OMG, you're so brave," one wrote. "Is there any good drama? Are the guys giving you a hard time?" They were disappointed when I told them no. They wanted a story about overcoming sexism. The reality, a story about crushing physical labor and soul-destroying monotony, wasn't as clickable. About 10 days in, I hit a wall. I was in the break room trying to force down a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. My hands were so stiff I could barely hold it. I saw my reflection in the dark screen of a vending machine. I looked haggard. I looked 10 years older. My eyes were dull. The confident, articulate woman who debated social theory on the internet was gone. In her place was this tired, broken creature. I started to feel a kind of low-level panic. I had 20 more days of this. I didn't think I could make it. That night, I tried to talk to Ezra, really talk. I told him I was struggling. I told him the pain was getting to me, but the invisibility was worse. I told him I felt more alone in a warehouse full of people than I ever had in my life. He listened, or pretended to. He nodded in all the right places. Then he put his arm around me. "This is the hero's journey, babe," he said. "Every great story has a low point. This is yours. This is the struggle that will make your final victory even sweeter. Think of the narrative arc." He wasn't comforting his girlfriend. He was storyboarding a viral video. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. The second week blurred into the third. My body started to adapt. Or maybe I just went numb. The sharp pains turned into a dull, constant ache that became my new normal. I learned the rhythm of the work. I learned how to lift with my legs, how to pace myself. I was still slow compared to Raymond and the others, but I wasn't a complete disaster anymore. They still didn't talk to me. My presence had been absorbed into the background noise of the warehouse. I was just another shadow moving among the shelves. I stopped filming content at work. The GoPro sat in my locker, untouched. I didn't have the energy, and I didn't have the heart. What was I going to film? Another shot of me looking miserable while stacking boxes? My social media posts became less frequent. I started using old photos. My audience started to notice. "Where's the warehouse content, V?" I told them I was deep in the experience and would share more later. It was a weak excuse. One afternoon, I was working near Raymond, loading a particularly heavy shipment. He was quiet as usual. We worked in silence for nearly an hour. Then, a pallet shifted unexpectedly. A stack of boxes started to tip over, right towards me. I froze. I just stared, my mind blank. In a flash, Raymond was there. He shoved me hard, pushing me out of the way. The boxes crashed down right where I had been standing, a heavy, sickening thud. I landed on the concrete floor, shaken, but unhurt. He stood over me for a second, his chest heaving. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, speechless. He didn't offer a hand. He just looked at the mess of boxes, then back at me. "Pay attention," he said, not unkindly. "This place doesn't forgive mistakes." Then he turned and started clearing the mess. The foreman came over, saw what happened. He looked at me, then at Raymond. He didn't yell. He just pointed at me. "Take 5, go get some water." I sat on the bench, my hands shaking. He had saved me from getting seriously hurt. He hadn't hesitated, and he didn't want a thank you. He didn't want a conversation. He just wanted me to not be a liability. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about being competent. It was about not getting in the way. That night, I felt lower than ever. My project, my grand statement, was a complete failure. I wasn't proving a point. I was just a burden, a clumsy amateur in a world of quiet professionals. I needed to connect with someone. I needed to feel like a person again. I decided to video call Ezra. I hadn't spoken to him properly in days. I hid in a quiet corner of the warehouse during my last break. My face was streaked with grime. He picked up after a few rings. His face was flushed and smiling. The camera was shaky. It was loud on his end. I could hear loud music, a crowd of people laughing. He was at a party. My heart sank. "V, hey!" he shouted over the noise. "Ezra, where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "At a gallery opening. It's awesome. How's the proletariat life?" he joked. I tried to tell him what happened, about the falling boxes, about how scared I was. "I almost got really hurt today, Ezra," I said, my voice trembling. He wasn't listening. He was waving at someone off camera. "Whoa, that's wild, babe. Hey, listen, that's exactly the kind of drama the project needs. A little danger. The stakes are getting higher." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's not drama, Ezra," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "It was real. I could have broken my leg." Yeah, for sure. Hey, I gotta run. My friend is introducing me to a curator. We'll talk tomorrow. Stay strong. Smash the patriarchy." He blew a kiss at the camera and hung up. I just stared at the blank screen of my phone. The noise of the warehouse machinery hummed around me. In that moment, standing in a dirty corner, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my name, I had never felt so completely and utterly alone. The third week was a descent. The incident with the falling boxes changed something in me. The physical exhaustion was one thing, but the emotional hollowness was becoming unbearable. My life had split into two incompatible pieces. There was the me at the warehouse, a silent, clumsy worker, a ghost in steel-toed boots. And then there was the me online, the confident, witty influencer who was supposed to be winning some grand cultural battle. The gap between them was so wide, I felt like I was being torn apart. I stopped caring about the project. I stopped thinking about the content. My only goal was to survive each day. I'd wake up, go to work, move boxes, come home, collapse into bed. That was my entire existence. One day, it was raining. Not a gentle spring shower, but a cold, miserable, relentless downpour. The roof of the loading bay leaked in a few places, creating puddles on the concrete floor. The air was damp and heavy. Everyone's mood was darker than usual. The silence was heavier. We were unloading a shipment of something dense and heavy, metal parts of some kind, packed in flimsy cardboard boxes that were getting soft from the damp. I was carrying a box when the bottom gave out. Dozens of small, greasy metal components spilled all over the wet, dirty floor. It was the loudest sound in the world. Every head in the bay turned. The foreman walked over slowly. He didn't rush. He just stood over the mess, looking down. He didn't look at me. He just looked at the parts scattered in the grimy water. I was braced for him to yell, to fire me, but he didn't. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet and laced with a weariness so profound it chilled me to the bone. "Do you have any idea what a delay on this shipment costs?" he asked the floor. "Any idea at all?" He finally lifted his eyes to me. There was no anger in them, just a deep, profound disappointment. It was so much worse than anger. "Get a bucket, get a rag, pick up every single one, clean them, dry them. I want them all accounted for." He walked away without another word. So that's what I did. I got on my hands and knees in the cold puddle. The dirty water soaked through my jeans instantly. I picked up the small, oily parts one by one. My fingers went numb from the cold. My back screamed. People worked around me. A forklift driver had to carefully navigate around my pathetic little disaster zone. No one said a word. No one laughed. No one offered to help. It was my mess, my responsibility. I was down there for what felt like an eternity, an hour, maybe more. It was the single most humiliating experience of my life, not because people were mocking me, but because I was so completely and utterly irrelevant to them. My struggle was a minor inconvenience, a logistical problem to be worked around. I finished, my body shivering, my hands raw. I showed the full, clean bucket to the foreman. He glanced inside, grunted, and waved me away. "Get back to work." The shift finally ended. I trudged out into the still pouring rain. I got to my car, but I couldn't bring myself to start it. I just sat there, soaked and shivering, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. Her face was pale, her eyes were red and empty. The carefully constructed identity of Veronica, the V perspective, had been washed away in a puddle of dirty water on a warehouse floor. All that was left was this broken, exhausted shell. I put my head on the steering wheel and I just broke. Not quiet, graceful tears. It was ugly crying, the kind that racks your whole body, that you can't control. A tap on the window made me jump. It was Raymond. He was standing in the rain, holding a cheap clear poncho over his head. I quickly wiped my face, embarrassed. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a moment, then gestured with the bottle of water he was holding. I shook my head, but he tapped on the window again, more insistent this time. I rolled it down a crack. The sound of the rain rushed in. He just pushed the bottle through the opening. It wasn't a question. "You look like you need it," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. I took the bottle. My hands were shaking. "How?" My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. "How do you do this? Every day?" He shrugged, the rain dripping off his poncho. "Got people who depend on me," he said simply. "Wife, a kid. Bills don't care if you're tired." He looked out across the vast, bleak parking lot, at the stream of tired men getting into their old cars. "Nobody's coming to save us," he said, more to himself than to me. "Nobody really cares how hard this is. You just do it. You show up, you do the work, you go home, you get up and do it again. That's the deal." And that was it. That was the secret. There was no secret. There was no trick. There was no life hack. There was only the relentless, grinding reality. The raw, unfiltered truth of it hit me like a physical blow. I started crying again, not even trying to hide it. "It's not fair," I sobbed. "It's so brutal." I had no idea. He didn't offer any words of comfort. He didn't say, "It's okay." He just stood there in the rain for another moment, a silent witness. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and walked away toward his own car. He'd heard me, that was all. But in that moment, being heard by this quiet stranger meant more than all the likes and supportive comments I had ever received. I drove home on autopilot. When I walked into my apartment, Ezra was there. He had cooked dinner, or rather, he had ordered expensive takeout and put it on nice plates. Candles were lit. He was smiling. "Surprise," he said. "I thought you could use a pick-me-up. We're on the home stretch. Only one more week to go. Then we can start editing the documentary." He tried to hug me. I flinched away. I looked at him, really looked at him. At his soft hands, his designer t-shirt, his easy, unburdened smile. He lived in a different universe. He had no idea. He couldn't possibly understand. "I quit," I said. My voice was flat. His smile faltered. "Quit what? A diet? What are you talking about?" "The job, the project, everything. I'm done." He stared at me, confused. "You can't quit now. You're almost at the finish line. We haven't even gotten to the triumphant conclusion yet." "There is no triumphant conclusion, Ezra," I said. "This isn't a story. This is just a miserable existence that people are forced to endure. There's no victory. The prize for finishing a hard day is just getting to wake up and do another one." He started to get angry. "So what, you're just giving up? After all this? You're going to let those trolls win? You're going to throw away all this amazing content?" "It's not content, Ezra," I finally snapped, my voice rising. "It's my life, or it has been for the last 3 weeks. And it's awful, and you don't care. You've never once asked me if I'm okay. You've only asked if I got good footage." He scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're just being dramatic because you're tired. You're an influencer, Veronica. This is the job. We monetize our experiences. You knew what you were signing up for." And that was the moment I knew. He didn't see me. He saw a brand, a business partner, a character in a story he was producing. My pain was just a plot point to him. I didn't say another word. I walked into the bedroom, packed a small bag, and walked out. He was still sitting at the candlelit table, shouting about breach of contract and brand integrity. I didn't listen. I closed the door on my clean white apartment and didn't look back. I spent a few days at a cheap motel. I didn't call anyone. I didn't go online. I just slept. I ate simple food. I took long, hot showers and watched the dirt and grime of the warehouse wash down the drain. I needed to erase it from my skin, but I knew I would never erase it from my mind. I knew I had to make one final video, not for the brand, not for the likes, but for myself. I needed to close the loop. I didn't go back to my studio. I set up my phone on the cheap particle board dresser in the motel room. The lighting was terrible. The wall behind me was a depressing beige color. I didn't put on any makeup. I just wore a plain gray sweatshirt. I hit record. I looked into the lens, but I wasn't talking to my followers. I was talking to the men in the comments, to the guys at the warehouse, to Raymond. "Hi," I started. My voice was shaky. "I'm Veronica. A few weeks ago, I started a project to prove that the idea of male struggle was a myth." I took a deep breath. I was wrong. I was arrogant, and I was ignorant, and I was cruel. I sat in a comfortable room and passed judgment on lives I knew nothing about. I lasted 3 weeks, and it broke me. Not just my body, but my spirit. The work is brutal, but it's the other stuff too. The invisibility, the feeling that you're just a disposable part in a machine. The knowledge that no one is coming to help you and that you're not even allowed to complain. Tears started to stream down my face. I didn't wipe them away. To every man who works a job like that, who gets up before the sun and comes home after dark, who sacrifices his body and his time for his family, or just to survive, I am so sorry. I see you. I finally see you. I ended the video. I uploaded it. I didn't write a clever title or add any tags. Then I deactivated all of my social media accounts. I don't know what the reaction was. I never looked. My life is different now. I left the city. I have a small apartment in a quiet town. I have a normal job, an office job, ironically. It's boring, but it's peaceful. I don't know what happened to Ezra. I don't care. Sometimes when I see a construction crew on the side of the road, or a delivery truck being unloaded, I stop. I watch the men work, the way they move, the quiet, grim determination on their faces. And I remember, I didn't walk a mile in their shoes. I only managed a few hundred yards, but it was far enough to change me forever.